Okay, so this is AQA English Language, Paper 1, Question 4. Now, obviously, I'm assuming that you've done lots of study, you've practiced loads, you've read loads of exemplar material, you've had a good go at it in class. So these are just really quick tips to remind yourself of what it's all about, what's going on. Okay, so question 4, 20 marks, it's absolutely massive. Double the amount of marks you get in questions 2 and 3, so it really needs to be taken seriously. A lot of people don't give this the most attention because they don't like it. However, I think it's awesome. It's a free-for-all. All right, now this is the typical type of question you'll get. It's question 4, focus this part of your answer on the second half of the source from lines 25 to the end. Now, again, it will tell you a designated area to look at. That's because for the rest of the paper, you've also had designated areas and it kind of stops any overlap. Even a little bit of overlap might happen, doesn't matter, just make sure that's your main focus. And it'll have some phony statement, a student or a teacher having read the section. In this case, it says the writer skillfully conveys the beauty of the place. It's as if you were actually there. To what extent do you agree? Lovely. So this is a setting question. It's all about the place. Not necessarily about characters, although you could bring them in, or about action again, you could bring that in as well. But it's about the setting. Okay, now in your response you should or you will write about your opening impression of the place, evaluate how the writers created these impressions, so that's all about technique, and support your opinions with quotations. So you've got your technique, it's language and its structure, it's selecting details, it's basically the kind of love child of questions 1, 2 and 3, all put in one together and kind of thrown in. So that's why you can't really get it wrong. All right then, so top tips. There's a lot of them, but there's a lot of marks. So the first thing is you must plan. You can get away with blagging questions 1, 2 and 3, but really you must plan question 4. It's more complicated, there's lots going on, even however you like to do it, even a mind map for each little section you're going to write about, or columns, however you like to do it. But I would spend a good 3, 4, 5 minutes planning your response. Also on the actual exam paper itself, circle the designated area. If it's lines 25 to the end, circle that. Now you might kind of contrast it to things that have gone before, but your main bulk of the mark's going to be there. Now also for this one, I call them Peter paragraphs, so therefore you make a clear point, preferably concept-led, which is kind of the idea, so it makes me feel anxious or whatever. Evidence, indirect or direct quotes, technique, use the subject terminology or else you're not going to get in those kind of bottom bands. Now, E, explore. All right, explain yourself, explain what everything means, but explore it. Add 3 or 4 alternative meanings, make links, explore kind of on emotional level. And then obviously R is the reader. What is the effect of everything you're reading? Does the effect change throughout? That's up to you. Now, as I said before, this is language features and structural features all together. You're not kind of being restricted to put them in certain little categories. You can just talk about them all at the same time. My suggestion on question 2, not to look at sentence forms. Here you can, but only if it's something interesting. Only if it's something like, I don't know, there's a list, lots of lists of things happening. Now, again, if there's an environment with lots of things coming at you, you feel bombarded, you feel a sense of nervousness, something like that would be great. Again, structurally, who's the narrator? If it's first person, you can easily say you empathise. So however they feel, you feel, and then you get yourself kind of higher marks. Next one, read the question. Read the question. What is it asking for? A lot of people get this confused with question 3 and think it's an overview. It's not an overview. It doesn't need to be done chronologically. Make links between the features. Now, there could be, linguistic links. There could be, 2 different environments, but they might have a common thread, like there could be lots of sharp references, therefore they're both dangerous. There could be, something like that. The beginning and the end, you could have a circular narrative. What could that mean? Don't simply start at the beginning and end at the end. It's not as good to do this one chronologically. You should be selecting the most significant or obvious feature. You're asked to what extent. Therefore, if you're saying, well, I really agree, you're going to show why you really agree. If the scariest moment or whatever is right in the middle, talk about it right in the middle. I would always suggest having a simple introduction, and I mean honestly like one sentence. A simple introduction to directly answer the question. So for example, I partially agree with the statement because blah blah blah, very quick, and then get on with it. It kind of sets your stall out. A lot of students will do a lovely piece of analysis, but they never actually said to what extent they agree. They'll just be kind of presenting. And yeah, although they're implying it, I think it's nice to just put something really clear like that early on, get it done. Now, loads of quotations. I'd like about 12-ish, something around about that point. A lot of people think that you can only put in, 3 paragraphs, for example, does require 3 quotations. That's hooey. You need as many as you can. You can have backup ones. Some might just be supporting ones. Some could be fully explored in depth, full subject terminology. Or you could list, I might have a lexical set that you could list all 4 of them. Not everyone will need to be fully explained. But make sure you're using loads of quotations. It's a reading exam. If you don't read the whole thing and prove that you've read it through quotations, you ain't going to do very well. Next point, don't hate this question. Everybody seems to really kind of get a bit scared. Think, well, 20 marks, about 25 minutes, that's a lot of work. But actually, it's a free-for-all. You can write loads. You're not restricted by talking about, this is just language. You can just put it all in. Lots of personal opinion. As an English teacher, my favourite thing, once I know a student understands the subject and they understand terminology and they can explore, is personal opinion. It takes you away from being a zombie to someone who actually is invested in the text. Remember, the examiner has selected this text because they think that you'll respond well to it. And you're kind of saying, yes, I do. Good choice. Thanks, examiner. And then suddenly they love you back. Now, as we saw, the example earlier was setting-based, but it could be setting or it could be character-based, it could be action-based, it could be atmosphere-based. So again, it's kind of what the overall feeling of an environment rather than the physical description of an environment. For example, if it says, a student having read this said that all the characters are brought to life. You might kind of say, well, one of them really brought to life, but one of them isn't brought to life at all. We only get a very quick literal description of what they look like. That doesn't bring things to life. So pare it down. I'd be looking for a simple introduction, 3 or 4 features, and a nice little conclusion. If you're struggling for a conclusion, just say what was the most effective point, what was the most significant point, what is the bit that interests you the most, and what you want to know next, specifically. Don't ever say, oh, it makes me want to read on, because that's an awful answer. It's like writing a story and saying, oh, and then he woke up and it was all a dream. No, thank you. I'd rather stick hot pins in my eyes. All right then, so good luck. Remember, with question 4, once you've read it, proofread it, go back to the beginning. You shouldn't be staring at a clock at the end of the exam. You should be trying really, really hard. Try and stick to your timings. Remember, you can write huge answers for questions 1 to 4. However, if you've only left yourself 5 minutes for question 5, there's 50% of the marks that are hugely in jeopardy. Now, this is just a little quick example. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but it kind of shows how you can include different skills in language and in structure. So, for example, if you look, a nice concept-led section here is the writer's presented with a tense and gripping scene. Again, that's a concept. We have repetition of an image. We have a motif. And again, we kind of come a little bit further down. Foreshadowing is a structural feature. Adjectives are a word type that you could talk about. So it's all there. So you might just like to have a little read for that, if you want to pause this for a minute or two and have a little through some ideas. This wouldn't be a full answer for me. This would be kind of, a third of an answer, maybe getting up to half an answer. But I'd expect a lot more in order to get the high marks. Okay, and that's about it. Look through your notes, make sure you understand subject terminology, language devices, structural devices. Make sure you read all the questions carefully and proofread when you've finished. Lots of luck.